my 18-year-old friend, fell in love with me, and I'm 40. He was just a kid when we first met, barely old enough to vote, with too much curiosity in his eyes, and a laugh that made everything around him feel lighter. I was 40, divorced, and not exactly looking to rewrite the rules of my life. But somewhere between shared conversations, quiet afternoons, and moments we both pretended not to feel, something shifted. He wasn't looking for a father figure or a mentor, and I wasn't looking for anything, until I saw the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching. This story isn't simple. It's uncomfortable. It's raw. But it's real. And what happened between us forced me to confront everything I thought I knew about love, age, and what it means to let someone in when you've already built walls that high. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. That helps us bring more emotional and thought-provoking stories like this one to you. I still remember the sound of his knock. It was a Friday evening, late spring, that weird time of year when it's warm enough to keep the windows open, but cool enough that the nights still carry a quiet bite. I had just poured a glass of red wine and sat on the couch, trying to lose myself in some documentary I wasn't really watching. Then came that knock. Soft, tentative, and somehow familiar. I opened the door to find Liam standing there with his backpack slung over one shoulder and his hair a little messy, like he'd just come from the skate park. 18. Barely, but taller than I remembered. Lean and wide-eyed, with that smile that used to get him out of trouble when his mom was still around. "Hey," he said, shifting his weight. "You said I could come by sometime. Is now okay?" I hadn't seen him in over a year. His mom, Rachel, was a friend of mine for a long time before she passed away suddenly from a stroke last winter. It shook me more than I expected. After the funeral, Liam kind of disappeared. Rumor was he moved in with a distant cousin 2 towns over, dropped out of school for a bit, kept to himself. Now here he was, standing in my doorway like a ghost I didn't know I missed. "Yeah," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." He walked in slowly, eyes scanning the apartment like it held something sacred. "Smells like you still cook," he said, and I couldn't help but smile. "Sometimes," I replied, closing the door behind him. "Mostly for one." He dropped his backpack by the chair he used to claim as a kid and sat down like no time had passed. I poured him some water, sat opposite him, and let the silence fill the room before I asked, "Everything okay?" He shrugged. "Honestly, not really." I waited. "I just needed to be somewhere that felt less fake," he said. "Everyone talks to me like I'm made of glass or like I'm about to punch someone. I'm not either." "I know," I said. "You were always better than people gave you credit for." He looked up then, directly at me, and I felt something shift. Not attraction. Not yet. But attention. Focus. A kind of searching I hadn't seen in him before. When he was younger, Liam used to look at everything with wonder. Now, he looked at me like I was the last safe place in the world, and I didn't know how to carry that weight. He stayed for dinner. I made something simple, pasta with garlic and olive oil, a recipe his mom taught me years ago when we still shared Sunday dinners. We talked about nothing and everything. He told me about the cousin's house, how cold it felt, how loud the silence was there. I told him about the dog I almost adopted and didn't. We laughed more than I expected to. By the time he stood to leave, it was almost midnight. I walked him to the door, and as he turned to go, he hesitated. "Do you ever think about how people come back into your life when you least expect it?" I nodded. "All the time." He looked down, then back at me with something unreadable in his expression. "I used to think you were the only adult who ever really saw me." The words hit me harder than I wanted to admit. "I saw you," I said. "I still do." We held that gaze too long. It was the kind of moment that should have ended with a goodbye. But instead, Liam stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me, tight, firm, not like a boy hugging a mentor, like a man who didn't want to let go. I froze for half a second. Then I hugged him back. And I don't know what made it feel different. The way he exhaled into my shoulder, or the way he held on just a second longer than he should have. When he pulled away, his eyes weren't uncertain. They were full of something else. Something I wasn't ready to name. "Good night," he said. And then he walked off into the night, leaving me standing in the doorway, heart beating too fast, wondering what the hell had just started. The next morning, I told myself it was nothing. Just a hug, an emotional moment between two people who had both lost someone. Maybe he didn't want to go home. Maybe he just needed to feel safe. Maybe I was overthinking it because it had been a while since anyone looked at me like that. But none of those maybes made me stop thinking about the way his arms wrapped around me, or how steady he felt, how intentional. I went about my Saturday pretending I hadn't stood in the doorway last night, stunned like a teenager. I cleaned, answered emails, half-watched a game on TV. But every now and then, my mind would flash to the look in Liam's eyes right before he said, "I used to think you were the only adult who really saw me." Around 2 p.m., he texted me, "Do you still have those old movie DVDs from when I was a kid? The dumb sci-fi ones?" I stared at the message longer than I should have. "Yeah," I typed. "Come by?" came the reply, barely 5 seconds later. I hesitated, then responded, "Sure, I'll order pizza." When he arrived, he was wearing one of those oversized flannels that kids wear like armor, paired with ripped jeans and a beanie. He looked older than he had yesterday, or maybe I was just seeing him differently now. We spent the first hour like we used to, laughing at the terrible effects, quoting the lines we remembered. He fell onto the couch like it belonged to him, his legs sprawled, his presence filling the space like sunlight through blinds. At some point, he leaned into my side to grab a slice of pizza from the coffee table, and didn't move back right away. His shoulder brushed against mine, light, casual, but it lingered. I didn't say anything. I didn't move either. "You ever think you peaked early?" he asked out of nowhere, his voice quiet, like he didn't expect an answer. I looked over at him. "What do you mean?" "I don't know, like, maybe the best part of your life already happened, and now you're just sort of coasting." The question punched harder than it should have. "I've thought about it," I admitted, "but I'm hoping that's not true." He nodded slowly, eyes still on the TV. "Same." A long silence followed, filled only by the sound of bad dialogue and spaceship explosions. Then softly he said, "I don't feel like a kid anymore." That made me turn to him. "I didn't say you were. But I see it in your eyes sometimes," he added. "Like you still see me as that loud kid who used to steal your sodas and ask a million questions about life." I laughed. To be fair, you were that kid. He looked at me then, and for the first time I saw it fully. He wasn't just playing adult. He was one now, or at least standing on the edge of it, aching to be taken seriously. "I'm not that kid anymore," he said again, "and I don't want you to pretend I am." His words hung between us like electricity, and then, just as quickly, he shifted the conversation. "I should probably head out. Got an early shift tomorrow." He stood, grabbing his bag, and walked toward the door. I followed, unsure of what I was supposed to say, or even if I should say anything, but when he reached the doorknob, he stopped again. "Hey," he said without turning around. "Do you ever think it's weird? Us talking like this? Me showing up here?" I paused. "Sometimes." He finally turned to face me. But do you want me to stop? I didn't answer right away, because I didn't know the truth, or maybe I did, and I was afraid to admit it. I don't want you to stop, I said, my voice low, but I don't know what this is. His eyes searched mine. Me neither. Another silence. And then he did something I wasn't ready for. He leaned in and kissed me on the cheek, soft, slow, right near the corner of my mouth. I'll see you soon, he said. Then he walked out, and this time I didn't watch from the doorway. I closed the door and leaned against it, heart pounding like it hadn't in years. Whatever line we were walking, it was blurring fast. The days that followed were quiet. He didn't text. I didn't reach out. But the silence wasn't comfortable. It felt thick, almost charged, like we were both waiting for the other to make the next move. I told myself it was better this way, that maybe it was just a moment, an impulsive kiss, that he was young and confused and I was older and should know better. But the truth was, I replayed that moment, his lips brushing just near my mouth, more times than I'd admit to anyone. Then came the message. 3 nights later. Want to get out of town for a few hours? That was all it said. No context, no emoji. Just a question hanging there. Like bait. I stared at it for a while, heart oddly tight in my chest. Where? I finally asked. Lake Belden. You used to take my mom there, right? The way he said it, casual, almost nostalgic, hit me in a strange place. I hadn't been back there since Rachel passed. That lake held memories of laughter, of late afternoon picnics, of sitting in silence with someone who didn't need me to speak. And now her son, grown, bold, and confusing, wanted to go there with me. I'll drive, I wrote back. An hour later, we were on the highway. The sky was darkening, stars peeking through, the soft hum of his playlist playing low. He sat in the passenger seat this time, legs propped on the dashboard like he belonged there. We didn't talk much on the way. He rolled down the window, let the wind mess up his hair, and occasionally sang along to whatever song was playing. I caught myself glancing at him more than once, and every time I did, I wondered the same thing. What exactly are we doing? When we reached the lake, it was close to midnight. The place was deserted, just the quiet lapping of water and the sound of insects somewhere in the trees. I parked near the old boat launch, where I used to sit with Rachel on summer nights. Liam stepped out of the car, stretched, then pulled 2 blankets from his bag. Come on, he said. Let's go to the dock. The walk was short. The wooden planks creaked under our steps as we sat at the edge, feet dangling just above the water. He handed me a blanket and wrapped the other around himself. We sat in silence for a while. Then he spoke. I used to watch how you looked at her, he said quietly. My mom. You loved her. I nodded slowly. I did. She never said it out loud, but I knew, and I think she knew too. I swallowed, unsure of where he was going with this. She trusted you with everything, he continued. Even with me. I didn't always do the best job. Yes, you did, he cut in. You were the one who stayed. I looked at him, really looked, and realized how much he'd changed. There was pain in him, sure, but there was also a depth I hadn't seen before. And that's what scared me, because I wasn't sure I could keep pretending that I only saw him as a kid anymore. Then he said, I think I've been in love with you since I was 16. My breath caught. He didn't look away. I didn't know what it was back then, just that being around you made everything make sense. Liam, I'm not asking you to feel the same. I just need you to stop pretending nothing's happening here. The lake was silent, the sky above us full of stars. His words sat between us like something alive. I didn't speak right away. I couldn't. because the truth was, I had felt it too. The slow burn, the confusion, the quiet yearning I tried to silence every time he showed up at my door. But saying that out loud meant acknowledging a boundary we might never come back from. Still, the words came. I haven't stopped thinking about that night. He turned to me slowly. Then why do you keep pulling away? Before I could answer, his hand brushed mine. It wasn't innocent, it wasn't accidental, and I didn't pull away. I should have pulled my hand away. I knew that, but I didn't, because in that moment, nothing felt confusing anymore. It just felt real. Liam's fingers slid between mine slowly, deliberately, like he was testing the limits of what I'd allow. I didn't flinch, didn't speak. We just sat there on the dock, hand in hand, wrapped in blankets, wrapped in something heavier than either of us could explain. And then, of course, the universe decided it was time to complicate everything. Headlights. Far off at first, bouncing through the trees behind us. Liam turned his head. You see that? I nodded, heart suddenly thudding. No one came to Lake Belden this late, not unless they had a reason. A minute later, we heard the engine cut off. Doors slammed. Male voices laughing, loud, careless. I didn't recognize them at first. Then a shout rang out. Liam? His entire body tensed beside me. Oh no, he muttered, standing quickly. It's Jeremy. Jeremy? My cousin and his friends. They were at the house when I left. Did they follow you here? I don't know. But if they see us... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I stood too, my mind racing. We'd been sitting so still, so quiet. It hadn't occurred to me how visible we were. Two figures on a dock, alone, hands clasped under the stars. It didn't take much imagination. Yo, Liam! That you? The voice called again, closer now. Liam stepped away from me fast, rubbing his hands through his hair like he was trying to erase the moment. You should get in the car, he whispered. Why? Because if they recognize you, us, they won't let it go. Jeremy's the kind of guy who'll post about it before sunrise. You didn't tell anyone you were coming here? He looked at me, ashamed. They knew I was meeting someone. Just not who. Footsteps crunched on the path. Flashlights swept the trees. The voices were louder now, closer. Panic twisted in my chest. I wanted to protect him. I wanted to say screw them, to hold my ground. But this wasn't about pride. This was about him, about his safety, his privacy, his choice. So I nodded and jogged toward the car, slipping into the driver's seat just as three boys stumbled onto the dock. Through the windshield, I saw Liam plaster a fake grin on his face. Dude! One of them shouted, clapping him on the back. Thought you ghosted us. Liam laughed. Nah, just needed air. They looked around. One of them pointed toward the lot. Who's the guy in the car? Liam shrugged. Just someone I ran into. Chill, man. I didn't hear the rest. I just sat there, gripping the wheel, my heart in my throat. 5 minutes passed before Liam climbed in beside me. I told them you were just some old friend of my mom's. I turned to him. Is that what I am? His jaw tightened. That's what I needed to say. I looked at him for a long time. He wouldn't meet my eyes. You said you didn't want to be treated like a kid, I said quietly. But what just happened back there? Hiding, dodging, felt like someone who's still afraid. He finally looked at me, and there was anger in his eyes. Not at me, at himself. I am afraid, he said. But not of you. Of what people like them will do with this. You don't have to live in that world. I still do. I let that sink in. He was right. As much as I wanted to pretend we were equals now, we weren't. Not out there. I had decades of distance between me and that kind of judgment, but he was still living it. "I'm sorry," I said. He nodded. We drove back in silence, but everything had changed. Whatever we were building, however slow, however quiet, now felt like it was teetering on the edge of exposure. And the scariest part? I wasn't sure if either of us was ready to hold it up. 2 days passed, and I didn't hear from him. No calls, no texts, and I didn't reach out either. Not because I didn't want to, but because something in the way he looked at me that night told me he needed space. There had been shame in his eyes. Fear, maybe. Or the kind of hesitation that comes from realizing the world is watching a little too closely. So I waited until Tuesday night, just past 9, when he showed up at my door again. The knock was quieter this time. When I opened it, there he was. Hood pulled up, face tired, eyes that looked like they hadn't closed in days. He stepped inside without saying a word and dropped his backpack to the floor like it weighed more than it should have. I closed the door gently behind him. "You eaten today?" I asked. He shook his head. "Didn't feel like it. You want me to make something?" He sat on the edge of the couch. "I just want to be here, if that's okay." It was more than okay. It was all I'd been hoping for. I sat down beside him. The TV was on, some old black and white movie flickering in the background, casting light across his face. We didn't speak for a while. He just stared straight ahead, breathing slowly, like he was trying to hold something in. Then, in a low voice, he said, "I almost told him." I turned to him, confused. "Told who?" "Jeremy, my cousin, after they saw us at the lake. He asked me if there was something going on between us. I said no. But it was right there, on the tip of my tongue." I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say. Liam leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I'm so tired of pretending I don't feel what I feel." His voice was soft but firm. "I've spent so much time being afraid of how people see me that I forgot how to see myself. But when I'm here, when I'm around you, I feel more like myself than I ever have." I felt my chest tighten. "Liam, I know what people would say," he continued, finally looking at me. "I know it's messy. The age difference, the history. I know how it sounds, but I don't care. Not anymore." I looked into his eyes, clear, unwavering, more certain than I'd ever seen them. "I tried to tell myself it was just admiration," he said, "that I looked up to you because you were always there for me. But that night at the lake, that wasn't admiration." He leaned in then, slow and deliberate. And before I could stop it, or maybe before I could admit that I didn't want to, his lips touched mine. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't reckless. It was quiet, honest. A question in the form of a kiss. When he pulled back, I didn't move. Neither did he. We just sat there, breath held between us. I spoke first. My voice felt raw. "You're not confused?" He shook his head. "Not even a little." And I believed him. But I didn't say what I felt, not yet, because something in me was still trying to catch up to the moment. Then he said something I wasn't ready for. "I love you." Just like that. No hesitation. No pause. Just truth. I stared at him, speechless. The air in the room felt heavy, sacred, like the silence that follows after a storm. And yet, even as the words echoed in my mind, I still couldn't answer. Because deep down, I knew if I said it back, nothing would be the same again. So I said nothing, and Liam stood up quietly. He walked to the door, picked up his bag, and before stepping out, he looked back one last time and said, "I needed to say it, whether you say it back or not." And then he left. and I sat there alone, with the taste of his kiss still on my lips, wondering if silence had just cost me the one thing I was afraid to admit I wanted. I didn't sleep that night. I kept hearing his voice. I love you. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't manipulative. It was just real, raw, honest. And I'd met that honesty with silence. The next morning, I stood in the kitchen, staring at my phone. No new messages, no missed calls, nothing. I almost called him 100 times. But in the end, I did something better. I showed up. He was on his porch, earbuds in, hoodie up. When he saw me, he stood, but didn't speak. I walked straight to him. And before either of us could overthink it, I said what I should have said the night before. I love you too. His face cracked, just slightly, but enough. He didn't say anything. He just stepped forward and kissed me. And this time, I kissed him back, fully, without fear. If this story moved you, take a second to think about this. How often do we silence love out of fear? How often do we wait, when the heart is begging us to act? Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to believe that love can come when we least expect it, and at any age.